This week, Siskel and Ebert review Glenn Close and James Woods adopting an unwed mother's baby in Immediate Family. Patrick Swayze tracks down the gangster who killed his brother in Next of Kin. And Jack Lemmon is the father Ted Danson hardly knew in Dad. It's all coming up next on Siskel and Ebert.
She's pregnant. Expecting right now.
Name?
Michael Spector.
Lucy Moore.
Moore.
Who's your doctor? Dr. Sanders.
Can we do this later?
No. When's your due date?
Now, obviously.
James Woods and Glenn Close play a nervous married couple trying to adopt their first child in Immediate Family. That's one of the new movies we'll be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. Our first movie is Immediate Family. And this is one of those movies that you somehow feel like you've seen somewhere before. It's well made, but really familiar. The film stars two of the best actors in the business right now, James Woods and Glenn Close, as a couple who desperately want a baby. And it also stars two other fine actors, Mary Stuart Masterson and Kevin Dillon, as a teenage couple who are having a baby and want to put it up for adoption.
I mean, it's a big responsibility. They wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes more than once. You gotta be there all the time. Have you guys thought all about this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
At times, it seems to Woods and Close that they've already adopted two kids, these two teenagers who have suddenly come into their lives.
Take it easy.
Okay, let's have it. Your most paranoid fantasy.
I don't want to talk about it.
They disappear with the baby in the car, only stopping long enough to rip off a few convenience stores on the way home with a sawed-off shotgun. You getting close?
Of course, no movie about babies would be complete without this obligatory scene.
Is this your first baby? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what are you going to ask me next? Like her sign? She's a Sagittarius, okay?
Are you pre-registered here at the hospital? Yes, she is.
Yeah, see, so this conversation's kind of redundant. So can we get on with it, kind of?
Who are you?
The parents.
Miss Moore's parents?
The baby's parents.
And how many times have we seen that scene in a long and checkered career of movie-going? We saw one version of it just 2 weeks ago, and look who's talking. Now here's another version. Of course, it's always followed by the obligatory delivery room scene with the mother breathing deeply and then short breath, and everybody shouting frantic instructions at her. And that was one of the problems I had really with Immediate Family, which was that no matter how well made and how well acted this film is, I kept feeling like I'd seen it already, seen this same adoption scenario in newspaper stories and on talk shows and in TV docudramas. The actors were never able to convince me I was looking at spontaneous real life because they never did anything I was really surprised by. It's not a bad movie, but they haven't made it a necessary movie. They haven't found anything new to say about this subject.
Well, I thought what I liked about the picture, and I did like some of it, was the whole showing of the tension that is placed on a family that is in adopting mode. In addition to the obvious thing of the waiting, will we get a child? But the dynamic between the parents and various forces that are going on between the two of them, and I thought Woods and Close did a real good job of showing that, how it really stresses out a marriage. I thought was very well done, and that's the part that I like. In addition, they do have four wonderful actors here. Mary Stuart Masterson, I've always thought is one of the best young
together we might almost get to the point where we liked all of this movie, because I liked the part you didn't like. I liked Mary Stuart Masterson.
No, I didn't say I didn't like that.
Well, then you liked the whole movie.
Yes, other than the part that you mentioned, which is, I think, really small, which is small.
Well, are you
which is the
giving
baby
it thumbs
stuff.
up or
You
not?
bet I am.
Okay, well, I wasn't clear on that.
Well, now you are.
Okay, fine, because I liked her performance, Mary Stuart
Terrific.
Masterson, who is one of the most overlooked and best actresses of her generation right now in terms of
Not by
the
us.
way that she tries to, in this movie, play fair to herself and to her own emotions, and she's so conflicted about this baby. That was good, but the movie in general just seemed like recycled material.
I don't think it's recycled. I think that by these actors, I think that all four of them are bright people, and I think that comes across. And I think that, you know, you realize that adoption is a lot more complex than you might suspect. Our next film is called The Bear, Something Special, a nature drama featuring a cast led by a couple of trained bears. And this story is sort of a bear's version of Bambi, with a young bear cub losing its mother in an avalanche and then spending the rest of the movie trying to befriend a big father-type bear and avoid hunters. The film is set in the Canadian wilderness in the late 19th century, and it's difficult to tell that these are trained bears. Still on the run from hunters, the cub is chased by a puma. The one time I knew the bears were trained was in this eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation with a hunter. What I like best about the film is the way it celebrates nature with great sights and sounds of the bears at play. The sounds these animals make are quite wonderful. Mike did beautifully. You get that thump, thump, thump as they're walking, and that makes you feel like you're watching a documentary. It feels so natural, and those beautiful sounds carry their own argument for leaving the animals alone, which is very much the spirit of this picture. If you've ever seen any animal in its natural habitat, you know that they are all strangely beautiful, even the ones you might think are ugly, and the bear does capture that truth. One problem, I found that a lot of the picture quite bloody, and I can't recommend it for little kids under the age of, say, 8. But for everyone else, I think it's a great picture.
You know, you mentioned that you thought the sounds were very realistic, and that's a tribute to the filmmaking, because this entire movie and its entire soundtrack was post-dubbed. When they were shooting on location, the trainer was shouting at the bear at every moment to tell it what to do. And in addition to that, every shot in this movie, sometimes they would spend a day waiting to get the bear just to look in a certain direction or look like this. They took 9 months to shoot this movie, piecing together literally thousands of pieces of film in order to create this film that seems to be so real and so unforced and so natural and so convincing.
Let me ask you a question. Now, you got that information from the press kit?
I talked to the director,
okay.
Yes.
Now, when you saw the picture, did you know that that was true?
No, I didn't. No.
I think that's important.
No, you would never know it when you saw it. What I'm saying, though, is that what they have done here, they've done it so well,
right,
that you would almost think it was a candid camera, you know, stick a camera behind a tree and shoot some bears. And actually, it was a painstakingly meticulous recreation of a natural habitat and the bears in that habitat, and that's what's so convincing about it. When you watch the film, you really feel like you're eavesdropping on these bears.
Coming up next, Jack Lemmon plays an old man who gives life one more chance in Dad.
With old Jake Tremont behind that wheel, you're as safe as if you were in your own bed. And it's almost as much fun.
Halloween's coming. What are you going to do about it? Whether you do a little or a lot, be an original this Halloween and find yourself at Hallmark.
Hallmark has a way.
And at participating Hallmark stores, get your hands on the Spooky Sounds tape, full of creepy sounds and Halloween theme songs. $1.95 with any $5 Hallmark purchase, only at participating Hallmark stores. It's a scream.
No more yearning, desire burning. Oh, what's the use? Now there's chocolate mousse. Yes, Weight Watchers deeply chocolate, velvety chocolate, chocolate mousse. Weight Watchers, this is living.
Our next movie is named Dad, and it stars Jack Lemmon in potentially one of his most interesting roles as an old retired man who allows his wife to manage every single detail of his life, right down to the toothpaste on the toothbrush in the morning. When the wife goes to the hospital with a heart attack, however, Dad can hardly survive on his own, and so his investor's son, played by Ted Danson, comes home to teach him how to cope.
Color? White, color, white, color,
Color. What about this one?
That one? That is white. Okay, it's colored. Yeah, it's got to be one of those.
Dad likes this responsibility and takes out a new lease on life. He even goes out to get the first driver's license he's had in years.
Okay, Dad, if you hit a parked vehicle and cannot find the owner, you must A, leave a note on or in the car, B, wait for the owner to return, or C, leave a message at the nearest house.
Why are you doing this? I've already passed the written test.
I know, but you can't be too careful. One of these very situations may appear during the driving portion of your test, and I want you to be ready.
I hit a car in the driving test. It isn't going to matter if I leave a note on or in the car or not.
Olympia Dukakis plays the wife, and she resents the fact that Lemon has grown more independent.
I'm not going to drive with him. He drove too fast before. I hate to think what it'd be like now.
Then tragedy strikes as the doctors discover that Dad has cancer. After major surgery, Danson doesn't think Lemon is getting the care he needs, so he takes drastic action.
But medically speaking, there's nothing more we can do for him. And we simply cannot hold hospital beds for patients who cannot profit from medical care.
How would we know? He's never gotten any medical care.
You have to understand, Mr. Tremont, while his condition is stable, basically he's custodial.
What exactly does that mean?
I'll tell you what that means, Annie. That means they don't give a if he lives or dies.
Mr. Tremont.
He's not custodial. Neither. What kind of word is that to describe a person?
Now, I understand. If you'll just come to my arms out.
If you want my father out of here, well, let me tell you something. I want him out of here more than you do.
And right after that scene, Danson literally picks up his father out of the hospital bed, carries him out of the hospital and into a car and takes him home. And that's supposed to be a scene that really tears you up emotionally in this movie, but all it did to me was make me mad. Now, I've been through major surgery with aging relatives, and I know the one thing you do not do is pick them up and carry them out of the hospital after they've had their abdomen cut open. It could kill them. So that scene in the movie is simply grandstanding, cheap grandstanding. A lot of this movie is the same way. I like the earlier scenes where Lemon is truly helpless and Danson is helping him learn to live again, but some of the later scenes in the movie were shameless, like the one where Lemon buys all the used clothing down at the beach and stages a costume party in the living room. That scene is a clear-cut case of filmmaking desperation. They didn't have the guts to really make a movie about old and dying parents, and so they tricked it up with cornball cliches out of sitcoms. Dad starts out well, but then it sells out.
I don't know that I even like the way it started out as all that much. And one of the things that bothered me about the way it starts out is the soundtrack, with lots of weepy piano music by James Horner, the composer, laid over the very first shots of Jack Lemmon in bed. And one of the things that I thought, because he's playing a 78-year-old man near death even at that point, I mean, he's a walking dead, which is one of the points of the film. And I thought, you know, old age doesn't have a soundtrack except quiet and loneliness. And why didn't they have the guts to make the film without that sound? I don't feel, when I watch this picture, I resent soundtracks like that. I think, you know, if they can't get me to be sympathetic to a guy who's alone in bed and near death, then no piano is going to make me feel it.
Well, the whole thing in this movie is their inability to really face death and dying. And I mean, it comes right down to Jack Lemmon's performance, which in the first scenes is pretty convincing, and then little by little his energy comes back until at the end he's practically breakdancing on the beach. I mean, it is ludicrous what he goes through during that period when he's going to have his new lease on life. It is straight out of television sitcom. It is straight out of going for cheap gags and cheap emotional payoffs as a way of avoiding the very issues that the movie is allegedly supposed to be about.
The issues are fascinating. I'll tell you another problem I had. I didn't for a second believe that Ted Danson was Jack Lemmon's son. I mean, I saw them as two actors standing side by side.
One of the things that they don't seem to know about Danson in Hollywood is that he's a cold actor, and they keep putting him in these warm roles, and he never seems to really... He should really be the guy who doesn't have any feelings, which he is at the beginning of this movie, but he doesn't convince me when he comes over at the end into his heart warming up. I don't believe that.
Well, the part that I believed, and the only part that I liked of the picture, was Danson's relation to his own son, which is a very strained kind of relationship. And when they talk, there's a scene that I'm talking about 3 minutes out of a 2-hour picture that I liked, and the 3 minutes that I liked was a discussion between the two of them.
And even then, they only brought the son in order to have symmetry. Here's a guy, he's got a father, and he's got a son. The son was unnecessary.
But that happens. I mean, in life, we all are.
It does happen sometimes. Yes, you're right. Coming up next, Patrick Swayze plays a Chicago detective with Kentucky roots, trying to fight mobsters and avenge his brother's death in Next of Kin.
I got 3 counties worth of kin that expect a certain amount of justice for that death.
If you like nuts, you'll love Cluster's cereal. only clusters, as delectable little nut clusters no nut lover can resist. Almonds, pecans, walnuts, and honey crushed into little nut clusters and mixed with crispy flakes. So if you like nuts, you'll love clustered cereal.
Our next film is called Next of Kin, with Patrick Swayze from Dirty Dancing playing a Chicago detective originally from Kentucky who is tracking the mobsters who have killed his brother. Here he confronts one of the mob guys.
Hey, Gates. Truly sorry about your brother. Too bad.
Oh, no, sir. He ain't seen bad yet, but it's coming.
Swayze wants to catch the killer legally, but back home in Kentucky, his friends and relatives want an eye for an eye.
I'll grant you we ain't perfect, but we are gonna find Gerald's killer.
Live for alive. Amen.
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 Eventually, Swayze's older brother comes to town to avenge the younger brother's death.
I want the man who killed my brother. Let's put our thinking caps on, boys. I don't have all night.
Now, this is a truly boring film, predictable as it builds toward its inevitable conclusion, a fight between the good old boys and the mobsters, a shootout in the cemetery with bows and arrows and guns. Patrick Swayze just marches through the darkly lit scenes, holding off the violence until the very end. No character, not one of them, is developed. Stereotypes abound. Next of Kin is a routine action film in every way.
Not routine in every way, Gene, because it has a few things that were completely ridiculous.
Oh.
For example, when they call Kentucky,
Right.
you know, and they say, okay, the next of kin, you know, they're going to come up and rescue Patrick Swayze in Chicago.
Right.
So then you have this scene where all the women folk are making sandwiches and wrapping them up in wax paper, so they have a picnic hamper that they can take on their school bus full of snakes from the Kentucky hills up to Chicago, so that one of the bad guys could, of course, be caught in the school bus with the snakes, leading to the following questions. How did the hillbillies in the school bus from Kentucky know which cemetery Patrick Swayze was meeting the bad guys in, since nobody else could have known that? And then how did the mobsters also know which cemetery? And how did everybody in the dark know which tombstone to go behind in order to find the guys they were looking for in order to shoot at the other guys? I mean, these are just a few of the... Another question, how could they have a 15-minute machine gun battle in a cemetery in the middle of Chicago without anybody calling the cops? I mean, I know I'm supposed to suspend my disbelief during these movies, but I'm just sitting there gasping during this film.
I was more stunned by the fact that it was just so dark.
Yeah.
The whole picture is shot dark, and that can be interesting, but that's if you care about who's in the dark.
Maybe you got one of these theaters where they don't turn the light up enough. Remember that leader of the projectionist union who told us once that most theaters have their lights set at 2/3 of the recommended wattage in order to save on the life of the bulb? Maybe if it had been turned up a little higher, you could have seen a little more, and maybe you would have liked the film better that way.
I think I probably would have liked it less based on your questions.
Well, then why are you complaining?
Okay, coming up next, in time for Halloween, the revival of a low-budget 1962 horror film that was made in Kansas and Utah. It's called Carnival of Souls.
Today's Duracell battery is quite simply a cut above. That's because it lasts up to 30% longer than the one from a few years back. Duracell. You can't top the copper top.
It's good. It's real good.
It's home cooking soup.
It's not hot enough.
No? Well, better let me check. Gee, I'd say perfect. Charlie, what do you say?
Celery and carrots are mighty good.
Well, Stan, how about you?
Chicken's delicious. Noodles, too.
Golly, Fred, looks like you got nothing to complain about.
Big guys, thanks for nothing.
Don't mention it.
Our pleasure.
The name is home cooking, and so is the taste. From Campbell's.
Pop Secret makes fun times even more fun. So get in on the fun. Pop Secret. We live to pop. The secret's out. New Pop Secret Light. Half the fat, all the fun, all the taste. So lighten up with new Pop Secret Light.
Our next movie is a horror film named Carnival of Souls, and this one comes attached to a story. The movie was made in 1962 in Lawrence, Kansas on a low budget by an industrial filmmaker. He only spent $30,000 on it, but this movie has never been quite forgotten over the years, and now it's being re-released around the country as a cult classic just in time for Halloween. The movie stars Candace Hilligoss, I haven't heard of her again, as a woman who's a passenger in a drag race. After the car goes into a muddy river, she's the only survivor. Her occupation is church organist, but she doesn't exactly seem very spiritual.
Profane. Sacrilege.
As she drives to her new job, she begins to be followed by some kind of a ghost. That is actually the director there, Herc Harvey. Sometimes she feels like a ghost herself. Carnival of Souls looks and plays almost like a long-lost episode from The Twilight Zone, especially in the way it relies on everyday life for its drama instead of depending on a lot of special effects. The movie was directed by Herc Harvey, who has a nice eye for camera angles, which makes the ordinary small-town streets of this film look weird and threatening. Carnival of Souls is said to have influenced such later movies as Blue Velvet and Night of the Living Dead. In fact, George Romero says that he saw it before making his movie Night of the Living Dead. And I think it holds up pretty well 27 years after it disappeared into the twilight zone of B movies.
I like the various things that you named. The camera angles, the guy has a nice sense of how to shoot an interesting picture, and we see that. And I thought that actually the lead woman had a real strange quality about her, I mean, she's supposed to be playing somebody who may or may not be dead, and certainly she has a real strange quality to her, and that some of the line readings are kind of funny. And so it was a curiosity, and I enjoyed it on that basis. It isn't to me, it wasn't a particularly gripping film, but I enjoyed it as a curiosity 27 years later. It's a precursor to the pictures you named.
Yeah, the ending comes along very abruptly, but of course, since we know what the ending is going to be anyway, I guess wouldn't have liked it if it come along any more slowly. But the very texture of the film, this black and white small-town 1962 photography, gives it a horror feeling that you wouldn't necessarily get in another kind of film.
Okay, now let's recap the movies we reviewed on this show. A split decision on the adoption drama Immediate Family. I thought the picture described well the tensions in adoption. Roger thought the material was all too familiar. My thumb up, his down. 2 thumbs up for The Bear, a remarkable recreation of bears in their natural habitat. Credit Jean-Jacques Annaud as the director. 2 thumbs down for Dad, with its highly melodramatic rendition of the trauma of old age. 2 more thumbs down for Next of Kin, the very foolish Patrick Swayze good old boy action picture. And a split decision on the revival of Carnival of Souls, the 1962 horror film that I found more of a curiosity than entertainment. Roger really liked its style. So The Bear is the picture that we're really recommending.
Yes, and you mentioned in your review that you wouldn't recommend it for kids under 8.
What do you think?
I would, well, you're right in the sense that these are real animals in a real environment, and they get involved in real situations. What I would point out, though, is that I would recommend it for people over 18, including adults. This is except for the smaller kids, this is truly a family picture in that it doesn't condescend at all, and so it's just as interesting to a viewer